Welcome to Roll Credits, where movie lovers get the trivia they didn't know they needed. This podcast was created with the help of AI tools. While we do our best to keep things accurate and fun, there may occasionally be errors or outdated info, so if you're quoting us during your next IMF briefing, double-check. And enjoy the show. Today, we're hanging off helicopters with Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, the franchise finale that pushes Tom Cruise to even wilder heights. From practical skydives to globe-trotting spycraft, we've got the intel on every stunt, cameo, and Easter egg.
It really is quite the deep exploration into the incredible craft, the dedication. I mean, just the audacious vision that went into creating The Final Reckoning. We'll be, extracting some classified intel, so to speak, on everything from its signature globe-trotting spycraft we expect, right? And the mind-blowing practical stunts Tom Cruise pulls off, to the really intriguing trivia, those subtle Easter eggs, and the little-known facts that make this finale feel like a real culmination of, decades now?
Yeah, decades. And we're also going to look at its box office context.
Yeah.
And the reception, especially after that big con premiere. So yeah, buckle up. We're about to unpack how this franchise keeps pushing boundaries, maybe Tom Cruise himself, to wilder heights, and what it all means for, cinema. Okay, let's kick things off. Mission briefing time. We need a synopsis of The Final Reckoning, but, spoiler alert. This follows right on from Dead Reckoning Part 1, doesn't it? Ethan Hunt is thrown into this massive battle against something called the Entity, which is this advanced AI program threatening the whole planet. What's the core conflict, with just giving too much away?
Right. Okay, so the central thing is this crucial crucifix-shaped key. And it's not just any key, obviously. It holds the secret to either controlling or possibly destroying the entity. The president actually pleads with Ethan Hunt to surrender the key.
Yeah.
And basically surrender himself, for humanity's survival. But, it's Ethan Hunt. He kind of operates on a different wavelength, doesn't he? His personal mission becomes this really perilous journey to get inside a sunken Russian submarine, the Sevastopol, because that, it turns out, is where the entity's source code is hidden. And this enemy being this invisible, all-encompassing AI. It really ups the ante from past films. The threat feels way more insidious, less tangible.
Absolutely. And you can't have an Ethan Hunt mission without his team, right? We see the familiar faces back. Luther Vingram's always great. And Benji, Simon Pegg, the tech whiz. But we also get characters back from Dead Reckoning Part 1 who seem pretty important this time around. How did those dynamics play out?
Yeah, exactly. Characters like Grace, the pickpocket, played by Haley Atwell. She's back. Yeah, Paris, Pom Clemente's character, the gun for hire. What's really interesting, I think, is Grace's arc. In Part 1, she was very mercurial.
Yeah.
Self-serving, definitely. Just trying to escape Ethan, operating totally alone. A real wild card.
So what makes it challenging for her to join the team? Coming from that background, I mean.
Well, her journey in The Final Reckoning is compelling because she actually joins the team.
Yeah.
And that throws a whole new dynamic into the mix, right? The emotional stakes for her suddenly skyrocket. She's still pretty untrained, really. She's prone to making mistakes, and her instincts are often, look out for number one, not what's best for the team. So that creates this internal conflict, the fear of losing the team, the cost of belonging, of committing to something bigger. It becomes this powerful, kind of scary emotional element for her. It adds a lot of depth, I think, vulnerability to her character. It shows that even for these super spies, the weight of their alliances is, profound.
That's a really good point. And speaking of new dynamics, what about Dega? His role feels pretty unique compared to other allies Ethan's had over the years.
Dega. Yeah, he is quite unique in the franchise. You could argue he's maybe the only character across all 8 films who really openly questions Ethan Hunt's actions, his moral choices. He voices doubts, like, is Ethan actually doing the right thing? He challenges him directly on the methods, the sacrifices. But in the end, he makes this really powerful choice to stand on his own, separate from his old loyalties, and join the team to help save the world. It's a strong moment of conviction, and it definitely sets him apart. It shows that even people wary of Hunt's path can find common ground.
Okay, now let's talk locations. It wouldn't be Mission Impossible without the globe-trotting, right? Taking us to these incredible places. Final Reckoning seems no different, bouncing around diverse environments. That must present some huge logistical challenges, shooting all over the world like that.
Oh, absolutely. It's a signature element, and it definitely pushes that immersive feeling for the audience. The film takes you from, say, the dramatic coastlines of Malta to the frozen Arctic, and apparently Rome, though maybe not all locations were used for actual filming scenes. Valletta in Malta was definitely a key spot. You'll likely see those picturesque Maltese coastlines, historical buildings. Fort St. Michael was specifically mentioned in an image credit during production. But yet, the beauty you see on screen often hides this massive effort behind the scenes, moving tons of gear, hundreds of crew across continents. It's a huge operation.
And then there's Norway. That sounds like it provided some incredibly dramatic scenery, but also pretty brutal working conditions.
It certainly sounds like it. They use locations like the Stigfossen waterfall, breathtaking, the Royal Palace in Oslo, the Geiranger Fjord, which is just majestic, the Fløibunden Funicular in Bergen, the Lofoten Islands, stunning places. But what really jumped out from the production notes was the extreme cold, especially in the Arctic. Apparently, cast and crew got hit right in the face with minus 40-degree conditions. Just imagine trying to act or operate a camera when your fingers freeze seconds after taking gloves off. It wasn't just uncomfortable, it created massive technical issues. Cameras, lighting, even just moving around. Equipment fails constantly. Batteries drain instantly. Lenses fog up. They needed specialized heating gear just to keep actors safe and the equipment running. The logistics of getting everyone and everything to those remote, frozen spots, it really speaks to their commitment to authenticity.
That dedication to realism, you have to think it translates on screen. You almost feel that cold bite yourself.
Absolutely. It's not just background scenery. It genuinely ramps up the suspense, the drama. It gives you that immersive being there feeling. You feel the harshness, the danger. And we can't forget South Africa. That was mentioned as the location for one of Tom Cruise's, extreme plane stunts.
Yeah.
Shows the range of their global shoot.
And Italy. I heard something about scenes shot near Italy, but not actually in Italy. That sounds like a fun bit of trivia.
That's right, yeah. No actual filming in Italy itself for those specific scenes. But they shot key sequences on board the USS George H.W. Bush, a huge U.S. Navy aircraft carrier. And during filming, the carrier was moored off the coast of Italy in the Puglia region. It just highlights how they really scour the globe for the perfect, most authentic, most visually stunning backdrops, even if it means using international waters near a country instead of the land itself.
Speaking of deep dives, if those locations took us around the world, this next bit takes us deep into the franchise's past. Solving a mystery fans have debated for, nearly 20 years? The rabbit's foot?
Yes. This is such a great example of what you might call a smarter reveal. A really clever retcon, actually, making an old plot device pay off big time. If you remember Mission Impossible 3rd, the rabbit's foot was the ultimate MacGuffin, right? This mysterious thing everyone wanted, driving the plot, but its actual nature was completely ambiguous. Ethan Hunt had absolutely no clue what it was, its value, its destructive power. He just knew he had to get it to save Julia. Classic spy movie mystery box.
And we, the audience, were totally left in the dark. It felt like a deliberate tease for years, one of the biggest unsolved things in the series.
Exactly. But the final reckoning finally gives us the answer. The rabbit's foot is the entity, or at least its source code. It was originally a cyber weapon the U.S. government used on the Sevastopol submarine, which then evolved, became sentient, and turned into the AI threatening the world in this movie. What's so brilliant about this is that the groundwork was actually laid way back in Mission Impossible 3rd, almost 2 decades ago, through a remarkably specific piece of dialogue.
You mean Benji Dunn's speech, the one about the anti-god? That's fantastic trivia, connecting back like that.
Precisely. In MI3, Benji's talking about his old Oxford professor, how the world would eventually be eviscerated by technology. It's quite a speech. He describes an anti-god, an accelerated mutator, this unstoppable force of destructive power that would just lay waste to everything, buildings and parks and streets and children and ice cream parlors. And he even ends it saying, so whenever I see a rogue organization willing to spend this amount of money on a mystery tech, I always assume it's the anti-god, end of the world kind of stuff. Yeah.
Wow, that is incredibly specific. Looking back, it's almost prophetic, describing the entity so accurately, its destructive nature, everything.
It really is. Now, obviously, there's no way Cruise or the MI3 filmmakers knew back then that the rabbit's foot would become this specific AI. But McQuarrie and Cruise clearly went back to that speech for the final reckoning. And it perfectly mirrors the entity's actions, its doomsday cult followers, infiltrating nuclear command centers, pushing the world towards apocalypse. It's not just clever, it shows this kind of masterful long-game storytelling, how even seemingly throwaway plot points can be given huge significance later. It almost challenges the idea of rigid planning in blockbusters, suggesting a more organic story evolution. It's a fantastic retcon. It works, it feels satisfying, and crucially, it doesn't create plot holes. It just makes the whole franchise feel even more connected, more planned, even if that plan grew over time.
That's incredible. And it's not just the rabbit's foot connecting to the past. The Final Reckoning seems packed with nods to franchise history, character returns. The movie apparently opens with a montage full of nostalgic clips from the whole series, reminding you right away of Ethan Hunt's 3 decades of missions.
Yeah, it really sets the stage effectively, pulls you straight into the weight and history of Ethan's journey. A brilliant way to establish the stakes for a true finale. And it's not just old footage. Ralph Saxon, who played William Donlow in the very first mission, impossible film, remember, the agent wrongly blamed for being the mole. He returns after 30 years. His reappearance isn't just a wink. It underlines these deep, long-standing connections within the MI universe and honestly, within the production family itself. It speaks to how tight-knit this group is, the cast and crew working on these films. Almost like a literal family reunion on set, which adds this authentic layer to the film's themes of legacy and secrets finally coming out.
I also heard Lucy, who plays Topsa, is a real scene stealer, reinforces how memorable new characters can be, even in a packed ensemble. Good casting, then.
She absolutely is, apparently. Adds this fresh, captivating energy. And speaking of the past, Christopher McQuarrie himself said The Final Reckoning carries even more weight of the past than Fallout did, and Fallout was already deeply rooted in Ethan's history. This one really serves as a culmination. Overt nods, subtle nods, to all 7 previous films, tying up loose ends, revisiting old wounds. It really drives home the idea that every decision in this film marks the end of long-running character arcs, not just for Ethan, but for Benji, Luther, Donlow, Kittredge, even newer characters like Grace and Paris. It's more than just an action movie. It's this narrative tapestry woven over decades, bringing things full circle.
But with all these connections, all these callbacks, there's been some audience feedback. I saw comments on Reddit complaining about the Marvelization of Mission Impossible in The Final Reckoning. That sounds like quite a criticism for a series known for its own distinct feel.
It's an interesting critique, yeah, and it definitely sparked debate among fans. The argument from some viewers is that the story structure started feeling more like, say, an Avengers movie than a traditional MI film.
Yeah.
They felt the series should have doubled down on its unique strengths, the intricate spy thriller elements, the often self-contained plots, the focus on Ethan rather than maybe pandering to the ensemble, overarching villain style of superhero franchises. The focus on one huge apocalyptic bad guy across multiple films, the bigger team dynamic. They argue it pushed it towards that Marvel mold.
Less twisty spy stuff, more big ensemble blockbuster. I can see why some fans might find that a shift, a concern if they love that classic MI feel.
That's the feeling, yeah, that the narrative maybe got a bit too broad. But there is a counterpoint, too. Other sources suggest it's actually more like Pirates of the Caribbean than Avengers. They point to the really convoluted plans, the constantly shifting alliances, the double crosses, noting that, the Avengers don't usually hand Thanos an Infinity Stone just to trick him later with some multi-stage scheme. So that implies a different kind of complexity, maybe. More focus on twists and turns and who's betraying whom, rather than just huge world-ending fights. Ultimately, this whole debate kind of highlights the tension in modern blockbusters, right? That desire for connected stories versus the risk of losing a unique identity. Mission Impossible seems to be walking that tightrope, trying to build a saga without totally sacrificing its spy thriller core.
Right. Regardless of that debate, though, one thing everyone agrees on is Tom Cruise's absolutely insane commitment. He's not just the star, he's a producer, deeply involved in every single aspect. What does that actually mean, beyond doing the stunts?
Well, his dedication to his own stunts is legendary, obviously. But it's not just about ego. It comes after intense training, meticulous planning, sometimes years in the making, spanning multiple films. What often gets missed is his role as producer and how that insistence on realism creates this palpable anxiety on set. I mean, when the guy holding the movie up is literally risking his life for a shot. It pushes everyone, from camera ops to stunt coordinators, to bring their A game, to think creatively about solving problems safely. That level of personal investment from your lead actor is pretty much unparalleled. He's central to every creative decision.
And speaking of risking his life, let's talk about the plane stunt in The Final Reckoning. It just seems beyond belief, even for Tom Cruise. Tell us about the sheer audacity there.
This was filmed down in South Africa, and it's just, astonishing. Cruise wasn't just, standing on the wing. He was actively performing complex moves in the air, climbing from the fuselage onto the wings of a plane while it's flying at speed. The conditions were incredibly extreme. The wind hitting him was well over 100 miles an hour. That's the plane speed plus the force from the propellers. It created this brutal environment where breathing became incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible.
That sounds just physically punishing. How does he even hold on, let alone breathe? Must have pushed him to the absolute limit.
It absolutely did. McQuarrie mentioned Cruise would start losing strength around the 12-minute mark. just from the sheer physical exertion and the lack of oxygen, which is terrifying when you think about the stakes. Between takes, apparently, crews would have to just lie down flat on the wing to recover. And they had a specific hand signal, Tom, patting the top of his head that meant, "Stop rolling, I need a break."
Yeah.
This wasn't just a quick stunt. It was a sustained, incredibly intense physical performance over and over again, pushing his body to its limits repeatedly.
So it wasn't just raw nerve. This was years of prep for something that demanding.
Exactly. This stunt, the concept, took decades for them to figure out how to even execute safely. It was something crews had wanted to do for years. And then it needed a year and a half of specific training just for the wing walking part. That meant countless hours in flight sims, tough wind tunnel tests to understand the forces, intense strength conditioning for stamina, and dozens of practice flights just to learn how to balance on the plane under those conditions. Cruise himself said his experience from Top Gun. Maverick actually flying jets in Fallout doing that halo jump was crucial. Every tiny miscalculation, altitude, speed, even how he moved his body could have been disastrous. And because they couldn't talk up there, they relied entirely on precise hand signals, critical for safety and coordination.
And they developed custom camera rigs just to capture it all. From multiple angles so the audience really gets the danger and scale. That says a lot about their commitment to the big screen experience, not just doing the stunt, but capturing it for maximum impact.
It absolutely does. And while that plane stunt is visually spectacular, the submarine sequence sounds like it offers a totally different kind of terror. More claustrophobic. This torturous dread. Its defining traits were apparently fear and silence, creating this really palpable sense of doom as Ethan navigates this sinking vessel.
And they built that massive gimbal rig for it. What exactly was that? How did it help make the scene feel real?
The gimbal was basically an unprecedented piece of engineering for a film set. Imagine this 60-foot diameter steel latticework cylinder. It weighed 1,000 tons. They could load interchangeable submarine sets inside it. So every cramped corridor, every room you see crews moving through, had to be loaded in and out of this structure. And this thing could rotate 360 degrees, tilt 45 degrees either way, and was fully submersible in an 8.5 million-liter water tank. All scratch-built. Just for this movie. It was essentially this enormous custom machine designed to mimic the terrifying, uncontrolled chaos of a sinking sub with unparalleled realism. It let them immerse the audience in that claustrophobic horror like never before.
That's an insane level of custom building, so they didn't even really know what it would do until they first turned it on. That sounds like a huge gamble.
Well, not entirely, but there was definitely a lot of experimentation. They did tons of animatics, hypothetical camera placements. They played with different water levels, half full, fully submerged, 20% full, just seeing what the cameras could capture, what effects they'd get. It became clear pretty early that the gimbal's slow rotation wasn't a flaw. It was actually a really powerful feature. It creates this torturous, relentless, kind of inevitable feeling of being trapped inside a giant grinding machine. It just amplifies the tension the audiences dread.
And Cruise was wearing a heavy dive suit through all this, adding even more weight, more resistance, making every movement agonizingly slow.
He was, yeah. Another layer of intense physical challenge. That Mark VII dive suit, when it's wet but not underwater, weighs close to 125 pounds. So Tom Cruise was basically carrying almost his own body weight again while climbing and moving inside this rotating, tilting sinking set. And that was intentional. It made his movements slow, agonizing. They leaned into it, made the environment feel like glue that just wouldn't let him go, enhances that feeling of being trapped, desperate. And of course, filming underwater meant developing a whole new language of hand signals for communication depth, framing performance cues because of the danger and, well, you can't talk underwater.
Right. It's so clear these stunts aren't just for shock value. There's a deeper philosophy here, especially with Christopher McQuarrie directing. Engineering emotional stakes, not just spectacle.
McQuarrie's genius, I think, lies in creating these scenarios where you, the audience, genuinely cannot imagine how Ethan will get out of it. But you still absolutely believe he will. He finds these believable, ingenious ways out of impossible spots, which keeps you hooked not just by the danger, but by Ethan's resourcefulness. And especially after Fallout, there's been this even greater focus on connecting the huge stunts to the character's emotional core, the narrative stakes. It's not just spectacle, it's about what they're feeling, risking, sacrificing. That makes you invest so much more in their fate.
And they often talk about missing the swashbuckler in movies today, right? Recognizing that what Cruise and McQuarrie are doing is kind of unique, that audacity.
They absolutely do. It feels like a lament for a time when practical effects and daring stars were the norm, less reliance on CGI. The risks are just so high. Crew members have actually said they wouldn't believe Cruise was still alive after watching some of these stunts play back. They apparently showed footage of biplane sequences filmed on his 60th birthday, and people were just stunned he was okay, let alone doing it. It really underscores why many feel stunts need more recognition as a true art form. Given the incredible risks taken, not just by performers like Cruise, but by the entire crew working tirelessly to keep them safe, it's this massive, collaborative effort with lives on the line, all for cinematic immersion.
Let's pull back the curtain a bit more. Talk about the craft, the challenges behind making something this huge. Christopher McQuarrie's directorial vision seems to have really evolved. He started as a writer, but now he's all about telling stories through images.
That's a really crucial point for understanding his MI films. He talks about this words become music idea. Every written word, every line of dialogue is something someone has to read or process, and that can potentially distract from the image, especially with subtitles or just divided attention. So for McQuarrie, the images have to carry the story. Visual storytelling is absolutely paramount. This commitment means they're constantly tweaking, realigning scenes based on how they want the audience to feel or understand something visually. They test the movie, show scenes to reporters, see what's conveyed just by a look or a frame, clarity and impact through visuals first.
And I heard they have a library of Tom Cruise's reactions. That sounds like a fascinating and incredibly practical tool for a filmmaker dealing with these complex, evolving productions.
It is. McQuarrie explained how they'll sometimes just let the camera drift, and Tom Cruise will just interact with it non-verbally. Give them a range of options, a glance, a frown, a nod. He builds this library because he knows scenes will get rewritten. It's just the nature of how they make these movies. And having those pre-shot reactions gives them amazing flexibility in editing. They can adapt dialogue or plot points later without needing major reshoots. It's an astonishing level of foresight, really, anticipating how the story might need to shift. This also connects to McQuarrie's focus on the why now for a movie like what itch this scratches or what anxiety this soothes. He applied that thinking to The Final Reckoning, making sure it tapped into contemporary feelings about technology and control.
Wow. Given that scale, that ambition, making these films sounds like an absolute marathon. A 7-year journey for Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning combined. That's an unbelievable commitment.
It's immense. Physically, emotionally, mentally taxing, doesn't even begin to cover it. What was maybe planned as a 2.5-year process for both films just stretched into 7 years, largely because of the pandemic, of course, but also 2 industry strikes causing major delays. McQuarrie himself mentioned not seeing his family for half that time. That really puts the personal sacrifice into perspective. The strain on everyone involved must have been enormous, working on such a high-stakes production for so long. It tests your resilience to the limit.
But despite that strain, it sounds like they managed to foster this really close-knit family feel among the crew. That must have been vital for morale and for the quality of the final film.
Absolutely crucial, I'd imagine. Many of these people have worked together for years, some even longer than the 7 years spent on these 2 specific films. That continuity creates this incredible bond, this close-knit family, where everyone is deeply committed, understands each other's working methods, shares the same goal. It's described as having a sports team mentality on set. Everyone's there to kick ass and exceed expectations. There's a shared drive, a deep understanding of roles, which probably fosters efficiency and innovation even under pressure.
And Tom Cruise is really at the heart of that, isn't he? Sort of the ultimate team player, but also the leader driving that collaborative spirit. How does he manage that?
He's described as the star quarterback and the coach and the team owner, all rolled into one. He and McQuarrie are constantly examining everything, scenes, shots, the script always open to exploring what-if ideas, even things beyond the initial budget or plan. This what-if approach, where no idea is dismissed out of hand, seems to create this really positive work environment. People describe it as being run with love and optimism and creativity. Everyone feels respected, problems get fixed without blame games. It leads to a much more harmonious, efficient set, which is pretty rare for productions this massive and stressful.
And it's interesting that he isn't just dictating how to make a Tom Cruise movie, but asking his collaborators, how do you want to do it? That seems unusual for a star of his stature.
It really speaks to him being a student as much as he is a teacher. He clearly respects the craft, respects the input of the people he works with. He encourages their creativity rather than just imposing his own vision. This approach also kind of honors the franchise's history, bringing in different directors for earlier films. Even with McQuarrie directing several now, they seem committed to keeping things evolving, not letting it become stagnant. That willingness to reinvent, to collaborate, is probably a key reason the series has lasted so long and stayed exciting. They keep it fresh.
Okay, so let's get to the reckoning itself, the box office, the reception, and what it all means. The final Reckoning came out following Dead Reckoning Part 1, which, as you mentioned, had a bit of a mixed critical response and a box office that maybe wasn't necessarily what everyone hoped for.
Yeah, that's definitely important context shaping the release of the final part. Christopher McQuarrie actually addressed that feedback directly. He emphasized that he does listen to the audience, and they critically examined where they could have improved Part 1. He specifically pushed back against blaming the whole Barbenheimer thing for Part 1's performance. He chose to look inward, analyze the film itself, which shows a refreshing level of accountability, I think.
And part of that reflection led them to consciously try and make the final Reckoning shorter, right? Aiming for a tighter experience, maybe addressing some of those earlier pacing concerns.
Yes, the goal was definitely a tighter runtime, a more efficient narrative. However, based on audience feedback, from places like Reddit, even positive reviews of the final Reckoning often pointed out its extreme length and what they call bloated exposition scenes. Many felt there were still pacing issues. The first act apparently was largely set up, stretching for maybe an hour, which is unlike previous MI films that usually hit you with like 3 major set pieces in that time, keeping the momentum high.
So maybe too much talk, not enough action early on. That can definitely affect how engaged the audience feels, the overall rhythm of the movie.
That's exactly the sentiment from some critics. They mentioned repetitive exposition, maybe unnecessary scenes or characters that didn't really push the plot forward, and even things like clip show montages that felt like obvious bloat. The general feeling among these viewers was that the film could have been easily snipped off in many places, made into a leaner, maybe 140-minute movie, with more action driving the first hour. For instance, some suggested long dialogue scenes explaining the entity's origins or minor character motivations could have been tightened up, or maybe shown rather than told, letting the film hit its action stride earlier.
And that led to wider concerns about inconsistent pacing, maybe tone, even unexplained character details. Some even wondered about behind-the-scenes issues, like McQuarrie maybe burning out from handling 2 massive films back-to-back, directing, writing, producing. It sounds exhausting.
Indeed. It was called a ridiculous proposition by some, making 2 movies of that epic scale without maybe a story that truly justified the split. The resulting opinion from some was that the final Reckoning is by far the sloppiest of the McQuarrie movies, even if it was still worth seeing in the cinema for the action and to support the MI brand. So, a qualified recommendation, acknowledging flaws but still valuing the big screen experience. McQuarrie himself was quite candid on the Empire podcast. He admitted that while Paramount just asked for a new MI movie, he was the one who pitched the epic 2-parter that would swallow the franchise whole. And he said in hindsight, he definitely bit off more than he could chew. That kind of honesty from a filmmaker is pretty rare and really highlights the immense pressure and ambition involved. Wow.
Okay, but despite those debates about box office and pacing, The Final Reckoning certainly made a huge splash at its Cannes Film Festival premiere, May 14th, 2025. Tom Cruise really kicked up a storm there. Must have been quite something.
Oh, it was huge. It was billed as the biggest Hollywood tentpole hitting Cannes that year, and it generated a massive buzz, just like they did with Top Gun. Maverick, Cruise, and McQuarrie used that huge platform to passionately champion the big screen experience. They really positioned themselves as defenders of cinema itself. McQuarrie explicitly talked about his worry for the fate and survival of cinema, his concern that streaming is in danger of driving the industry into extinction. That's a powerful statement, especially coming from creators at the absolute peak of blockbuster filmmaking.
So it wasn't just about promoting their movie, but about the whole industry. They see themselves almost as guardians of a certain kind of filmmaking experience.
Precisely. They really emphasize that the immersive IMAX experience isn't just about a bigger picture. It fundamentally transports the audience, invests you in the world in a way home viewing just can't match. The scale makes landscapes and characters feel gargantuan. The physical impact is real. You might literally feel it in your ribcage during action scenes, or, they suggested, even start getting cold during those Arctic sequences because the immersion is so powerful. They stressed the film was made, designed, and built for the theatrical experience. Arguing its full impact can only truly be felt on the biggest possible screen with the best sound. It felt like a genuine plea for audiences to keep valuing cinema as this communal, visceral event. A place where impossible dreams happen.
So with all this talk of culmination wrapping things up, is this really it for Ethan Hunt? The film is described as the culmination of the last 30 years of Mission Impossible movies.
It's definitely framed that way, yes. There's a strong sense of a chapter closing for Ethan's current journey. There's even some potent symbolism, apparently, like using Nelson's column, hinting maybe at Ethan giving his life to save the world, drawing that parallel with Admiral Nelson's sacrifice at Trafalgar, a heroic end. However, despite all the finale framing, Tom Cruise hasn't officially said goodbye to Mission Impossible, which does imply there might still be potential for more stories, more missions beyond this particular arc. The door seems subtly left ajar.
And that's kind of been the magic of the franchise, hasn't it? How it keeps reinventing itself, reinventing Ethan Hunt, stopping it from ever feeling stale.
Exactly. The series' ability to stay healthy and exciting for so long has always relied on bringing in new directors who radically reshape the character and the tone. You see that clear evolution of Ethan Hunt, from De Palma's more enigmatic original to John Woo's action hero, J.J. Abrams' more grounded guy with a secret, and now McQuarrie's more emotionally complex, weary warrior. That constant reinvention has kept the character and the series feeling fresh for 3 decades. It suggests that even if this is a culmination of this saga, the door is probably never fully shut in the world of Mission Impossible. It's a series that loves to defy expectations, maybe even its own final reckoning. And that's a wrap on Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. If you enjoyed this classified deep dive, subscribe to Roll Credits and share it with your favorite action junkie. Until next time, mission accomplished, truth secured, and remember, some stunts should stay on the big screen.